This is the Disaster Management and Healthcare lecture for 2026. So for your learning objectives at the end of this lecture, you should be able to understand the basic framework of disaster preparedness, response, recovery, mitigation in the context of the health system, both nationally and globally. Have basic foundational knowledge about disaster risk reduction and management in health, as well as a working understanding of health emergency and disaster risk management framework. Apply what you have learned to real-world situations as a participant during times of crises and disasters, and grasp basic concepts in disaster management in all levels of the health system and in both public and private sectors. Conduct any self-directed learning for any knowledge gaps that you identify. We will be balancing between specifics and generalities, and this lecture will, as much as possible, focus on the forest rather than the trees, avoiding the specifics and details of budgeting and bureaucratic processes. So when we talk about disaster risk reduction from a global or international perspective, it always goes back to the guiding principles of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction 2015 to 2030. The Sendai Framework is the outcome of stakeholder consultation in 2012 and intergovernmental negotiations from 2014 to 2015 initiated by the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. Notice that we are only 5 years away. Oh, sorry, it's now 2026. So 4 years away from that period range, and we are due for an amendment or even massive alteration of this framework given the way calamities and disasters have happened within the past decade or so, especially in the context of geopolitical shifts. As you may have probably heard, if you are continuously glued to the news, the United States has already pulled away from the WHO as a member. And with that, the massive funding that it gives to the World Health Organization, as well as its capabilities, technical capabilities in tracking infectious diseases. So any hope of helping solve the next pandemic globally as a united planet or species are pretty much unclear and uncertain. Okay? And also, the United Nations itself has sent memos to its member countries to pay their debts in membership, and it is actually potentially in danger of shutting down its functions because of said members' debts this July. Okay. Uh, when this was made, the Sendai framework, the principles, we were looking at the context of singular once in a generation typhoon, but that in itself is false because 5 years before or 4 years before, 5 years before Typhoon Yolanda, which happened in 2013, sorry, 4 years, there was Typhoon Ondoy. So we were looking at singular events. And then in 2020 to 2024, it was almost every year that there was a typhoon whose name was retired because they were wholly damaging for a certain region of the country. And again, we're only looking at typhoons. There are other natural hazards that are present in this country. Okay. Normally, I am recording this lecture in the previous years. I would record this lecture in the middle of torrential rains or even in the middle of a typhoon. Okay? But it is already, well, almost mid-July, and we are yet to experience the um, extreme flooding that usually involves the campus in Aurora Boulevard. And the reason for that is we are actually looking at a possible dry year. It may not look that way here in Metro Manila, but certain areas in the northeastern part of Luzon are already um, showing signs that they might be undergoing a drought. No major rains, and it is in danger. The rice fields up north or northeast might be in danger of having failed crops for this harvest for the coming harvest season. So with the guiding principles of the Sendai framework, we have to focus mostly on number one, so guiding principle one, guiding principle three, and guiding principle four. But all of the principles are important, okay? But I would like to emphasize that it is the primary responsibility of member states to prevent and reduce disaster risk, including through cooperation. We don't live in a vacuum, so this isolationism that comes from our former colonial master across the Pacific not only baffles me, but it also effectively weakens our capability to prevent and respond to disasters. Okay? And disaster response and disaster prevention and preparedness and recovery, it should be a shared responsibility between the central or national government and the local authorities, the local governments, as well as both the public and the private sectors, and all manner of stakeholders as appropriate to national circumstances. Emphasis on number three, guiding principle, we have to protect the people, okay? Personally, I would like to highlight persons, people, and their assets. Again, this can be problematic because a lot of times, in terms of the economic impacts of a disaster, okay, the economic impact of a calamity, we often focus on how much of people's properties or produce were destroyed, and we fail to take into account the lives that are lost. Okay, each and every single life that was lost. And we have to focus on protecting people and protecting all human rights, including the right to development. And of course, emphasis on number four, engagement from all of society, which is a repeat basically from guiding principle number two. Okay, I won't be dictating or saying all of the other guiding principles. You can read it. I will be posting the slides on Canvas. The second part of the guiding principles have mainly to do with sustainable development policies and building back better and preventing and reducing existing disaster risk. Okay, disaster risk reduction should be intertwined. Okay, intertwined, fundamentally intertwined and inseparable from sustainable development. It is not sustainable development, in my opinion, if there is no disaster risk reduction. So sustainable development, people will say, oh, this building that we are making is ecologically conscious. It's a smart building. It uses um, it uses renewable energy. But that building is built along a tectonic fault line. Okay? And it's a skyscraper. And no matter how earthquake resistant it is, you still created a risk for a possible disaster. Disasters aren't equitable. They often affect the most vulnerable and the most marginalized. So the Philippine model of disaster management is the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council. Until August 2011, it was called the National Disaster Coordinating Council, and it was renamed because when you think about it, it sounds like they are coordinating disasters, right? So now it's the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council. and it is administered by the Office of Civil Defense under the Department of National Defense. So the important issuances and legislation about this includes Presidential Decree 1566 series of 1978, so it is before the 1987 Constitution, Executive Order number 832 or 832 series of 2009, and Republic Act 10121 or the Philippine Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act of 2010. Okay? So it got its name after there was an enactment of the NDRRMC. Normally, I would have you pause the video so that you will write down what you think the NDRRMC's mandate is, its powers and functions, including, but let's simplify it. So, in accordance with the Sendai framework, the NDRRMC needs to develop its own framework to provide a comprehensive all hazards, multi-sectoral, interagency, and community-based approach to disaster risk reduction and management. And it is the overall principal guide to disaster risk reduction and management efforts in the country, reviewed every 5 years or as deemed necessary to ensure its relevance to the times. So, 10 years ago, when you were still in elementary or high school, its relevance were these typhoons that visited the country once a year. But now we are living in the age of having missed the 1.5 degrees Celsius target by the Paris Accords. Okay, we were supposed to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions so that we don't hit 1.5 the 1.5 degrees Celsius global average temperature increase. So, unfortunately, by the time you graduate from medical school and after your internship, when you are licensed medical doctors, you will see extremes in the climate. So, really strong typhoons as more energy from the sun is transferred into the oceans, and then more energy from the sun generates all of these strong winds, typhoons, and also that yeah, greenhouse gases trap heat, effectively increasing and making the world slightly hotter and more unbearable to live in. Okay, it's going to be not a pretty place. Okay, and you have to ensure, the NDRRMC has to ensure that the current plan is consistent with the framework. Okay? And of course, the council, as a council, it has to advise the highest office on the land regarding the status of disaster preparedness, prevention, mitigation, response, and rehabilitation operations that are being undertaken by the government. So right now, they ought to be doing that with regards to the 7.8 magnitude Mindanao earthquake that happened a few months ago. Okay? And again, not just by the government, but civil society organizations, the private sector, and volunteers, and recommend to the President the declaration of a state of calamity in areas extensively damaged by a disaster, and submit proposals on how normalcy can be restored in these affected areas. There are still thousands of people displaced in Mindanao because of the earthquake. So, of course, normalcy has not been restored. So, with that, maybe usage of calamity fund allocations, if there are any, are needed to help these displaced families. It might sound repetitive, but part of the powers and functions of the NDRRMC is to ensure a multi-stakeholder participation in developing and updating and sharing of a disaster risk reduction and management information system and geographic information system. Again, because we need to have every sector, every level of government, everyone, all citizens, or anyone living in the country engaged with regards to disaster risk reduction preparedness, prevention, and response, and recovery and rehabilitation. And then establish a national early warning and emergency alert system to provide accurate and timely advice to our national or local emergency response organizations and the general public. So for those of you who have an iPhone, I'm not sure if Android still has the SMS alerts, but the iPhone, on the other hand, it has that alert that generally, uh, even when your phone is on silent mode, it cuts through or overrides that. These are through the efforts of the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council. Okay, so informing the general public includes digital and broadcast, analog broadcast media, so your free TV and your free radio, cable television, satellite television, radio, wireless communication, and landline communications. And then, again, part of the powers and functions are to develop the appropriate risk transfer mechanisms to guarantee social and economic protection in the face of um, in the face of a disaster. Okay. So the next few slides deal about the specifics. So again, about the budgeting, including the mobilization of the NDRRMC uh, funds, monitoring and providing guidelines and procedures on the local counterparts. So you have your provincial disaster risk reduction and management councils and your municipal or your city disaster risk reduction and management councils, including utilization, accounting, and auditing of various resources needed to address certain hazards and certain disasters. And then this is long, the mandate is long because again, the framework is all encompassing. So we have connections to the Climate Change Commission. Um, in your environmental health lecture that will be happening in the next few weeks, we will hopefully learn about the Climate Change Commission and why uh, on paper, it is very good that we have existing legislation addressing that climate change is not only very real, but we are going to be impacted a lot by climate change. Okay, and again, back to the national and the local governments, more mention of that in the powers and functions. And use of various research and technologies in developing ways that we can improve disaster risk reduction and management. Okay. Again, more mention of the Climate Change Commission and various technical management groups in the member departments to coordinate and meet as often as necessary to effectively manage national efforts on disaster risk reduction and management. And then, last but not least, task the Office of Civil Defense to conduct periodic assessment and performance monitoring of the various member agencies and the regional disaster risk reduction and management councils, and then coordinate or oversee the implementation of the country's obligations with disaster management treaties to which it is a party, and to see to it that the country's disaster management treaty obligations be incorporated in its disaster risk reduction and management frameworks, policies, plans, programs, and projects. So you're thinking, there are cynical members of our society, particularly online, who keep asking why we send disaster personnel, disaster response personnel to various countries. Again, let me remind you, disaster response doesn't exist in a vacuum. And during the time that we needed help, other countries extended help to us, not just in the form of budget or loans or donations. They sent experts, they sent response personnel, they sent even foreign aid workers and foreign medical personnel to help us. Especially what comes to mind is Yolanda, okay? Because that one, so many different members of the international community came to help, and I was there personally to witness it firsthand. Okay. So with that, it is right, and it is also not just an obligation. It is also uh, yeah, nobody does it alone. No country does it alone. The National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council is headed by the following agencies. Note that it is baked into our system that the Department of National Defense, I guess it is because of how the military operates with specific timelines and specific objectives, that it is made the head of the NDRRMC, whereas the Department of Interior and Local Government is the vice chairperson for preparedness. The Social Welfare and Development is for response, and the Department of Science and Technology for prevention and mitigation, and the National Economic Development Authority is the vice chair for rehabilitation and recovery. And the way these agencies are heads for the various stages of uh, disaster management shows you that it makes a logical sense. Okay, so preparedness is on the local government's part, social welfare and development for response. Okay, science and technology for preventing and mitigating disasters, while rehabilitation and recovery is on the part of our economic overlords. Okay? These are the members of the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council. So note that the Department of Health is not a vice chair in of the council. Okay. A few more members from various branches of various agencies under the executive branch, and then our volunteer service organizations, civil service organizations, and then local government unit authorities and leagues, okay, and private sector representatives and other representatives from civil service organizations, okay, and yeah, these are selected uh, through specific criteria and mechanisms set forth by the council. Okay, so let's do a quick quiz about what are the most important things to manage in the health sector during and in the period. So about 3 to 4 days after a major disaster. Okay, so let's talk about the health sector and its role in disaster management. Write these down and see if it matches what is listed in the next slide. So for our local Department of Health, they use the Disaster Risk Reduction and Management in Health framework, where the objectives are to ensure continuity of un, and uninterrupted health services, avoid preventable deaths and injuries or morbidities. So aside from deaths due to the disaster or the hazard, also deaths because of the displacement and putting people in refugee or evacuation centers, so secondary outbreaks of diseases because of infectious diseases because of the disaster. So yeah, there. Those are the three main objectives of the health sector in disaster risk reduction and management in health. So classically, when we think of the emergency cycle, we usually think of two things baked into the Health Emergency Management Bureau of the DOH is disaster preparedness and planning and disaster response. Okay, but we learned that, of course, aside from preparing or responding to a disaster, we also need to recover and rehabilitate areas that are affected by a disaster. And recently, though not yet, well, this is becoming official, so hopefully it will also be incorporated into our own local disaster management framework, prevention or mitigation of disasters. Okay, so on the health sector side, for disaster management, prevention means designing a health system so that health emergencies can be avoided before they do more damage during disasters. Preparation means designing the health system so that it can manage any type of health emergency in the event of a disaster. And response means designing the health system so that efficient and effective interventions are utilized during a disaster. While recovery means the health system is designed so that there is room for introspection and improvement that will be proactive in addressing the next disaster. So prevention or mitigation. So prevention means avoiding it altogether, while mitigation means the hazard cannot be 100% avoided. So for example, we live in a country that is in the Pacific Ring of Fire. So many active volcanoes, uh, tectonically active plates, okay? So oceanic plates. And we also have a lot of typhoons. So we can't avoid the hazards altogether. So we have to find methods and ways to mitigate uh, disasters. Okay, so mitigate the hazards. So design earthquake and typhoon-proof infrastructure, or don't build your um, don't build your hospitals in areas where they are most likely to be hit by a typhoon or to be affected by an earthquake. Okay, create infrastructure systems and processes resistant to the hazards, and design contingencies. And we will talk about contingencies and business continuity plans in case of disruptions, and build communities and invest in areas that are not hazard prone. And then the preparation phase of the disaster cycle include disaster management, accepting that disasters and calamities are part of existence and preparation for them is always key. So, preparation includes service or business continuity planning, practicing these plans as well as your contingency plans, prepositioning commodities, people, and items needed for disaster response, proper risk communication, which we talked about in our orientation, part of our five-star physician model, as well as having a budget for these. Okay, so an analogy for this for men and women. So for women, okay, particularly those of reproductive age, they will always have hygiene products either in their lockers, in their bags, purses, handbags, or even in their car. Okay, in the chance that their menstrual cycle comes earlier than usual. Okay? And for men, this might sound off kilter, but this was actually discussed by my Econ 11 professor, Professor Winnie Monsod. Any red-blooded male of our specific age will always have condoms in their wallet. Okay? For obvious reasons. Okay? And for those who are into the everyday carry or tactical scene, people will always have a bug out bag either on them right now, or in their car, or in their house. Okay, conveniently stashed away. And then after, when the disaster hits, you have to respond. And effective disaster response is knowing and addressing the who, what, when, where, how, and even why during and in the immediate period after a disaster. So if you have already pre-positioned your resources, you know how to deploy them already. You don't have to have them cross um, various airspace, or cross a strait or a gulf or a wide swath of land just to bring them to the areas that are affected. So that's why ideally all areas should have resources that are stored, conveniently stored in warehouses in case a disaster strikes. And then recover and rehabilitate. Okay, so the most important part when in this phase of the cycle is to have the capacity for self-awareness and evaluation, self-evaluation. Take lessons from the last disaster, what parts in the preparation, in the prevention, in the response worked, and what didn't work, so that you will avoid repeats or a restart of the cycle. And one of the concepts that we took away from Yolanda with regards to many damaged rural health units was to build back better. Because recovery leads to prevention and avoiding repeats of the damage or interruption of the last calamity from happening again. So consider almost 20 years ago, okay, so 27 years ago, around September, there was a massive flood that happened to people studying in UERM, College of Medicine, while they were clinical clerks, fourth-year medical students. Some of these students were my classmates in undergrad. Okay, so I got to hear their stories about what happened, how the flood reached the parking lot and basically moved cars around, and there was an anesthesiology consultant who was trapped in her own vehicle. Okay, and on UERM side, they invested in their own infrastructure to prevent or at least mitigate the repeat flooding from Ondoy level events. There are keywords with regards to the UNISDR disaster risk reduction terminology. It's updated from 2009. This is in the manual, so you can look it up in the manual. But there are also additional words that I will be taking and asking questions from in the manual. So these include hazard, the difference between emergency versus a disaster, risk, vulnerability, capacity, and the disaster equation. So your hazard is any dangerous phenomenon or activity or substance, whether natural or man-made, that can cause injury, death, or other deleterious effects on health and or loss of property. So their categories include geological and hydrometeorological, that are natural hazards, biological hazards, technological hazards, and societal hazards. And societal hazards are always human induced. Okay, so if you have a coup d'etat, if you have civil unrest, if you have a civil war, or if you have an invasion by another foreign country into your own country, that's a societal hazard. And then the difference between an emergency and a disaster: an emergency is an actual threat to public safety or public health, such as the COVID pandemic, and a disaster is a serious disruption of a community and society with material, economic, environmental, and human losses exceeding the ability of the community or society to cope using its own resources. There are no such things as natural disasters. only natural hazards. Like the term accident, okay, whenever you have a vehicular collision, we don't call them accidents anymore because, like disasters and accidents, the connotation is these things couldn't have been avoided. But in reality, they could have been avoided or at least mitigated. That patient in the emergency room suffering multiple fractures as well as traumatic brain injury could have been wearing a seatbelt if he was in a four-wheeled vehicle, or if he was on two wheels, he could have been wearing a helmet. Okay? It wouldn't protect them 100%, but it could have mitigated the effects of the vehicular collision. Same way with the speculated big one, the earthquake that they think will hit Metro Manila sometime soon. Okay, um, we've had so many buildings that have been put up, high rise at that, taking advantage of a real estate boom. Okay, but the question is, sure, you can design earthquake resistant buildings, but how many of these buildings were actually built to such standards? Okay. So what is risk? Risk is the health consequence, which are the negative effects of a hazard that can worsen the current health of an affected population. So an example of this would be my province of deployment as a doctor to the barrio in Marinduque. Um, there was a time that there was a copper mine operating there, and they didn't properly uh, seal off their waste products, so that one day the dike that was where these waste products were being kept breached, and it spilled off into the Buak River, killed off a lot of farm animals, spilled into the ecosystem and into the sea, so that there was mercury spilling into the ecosystem. And so a risk would be people eating the fish from Marinduque and developing symptoms of mercury poisoning, including Minamata disease. Vulnerability, on the other hand, is the characteristics and circumstances of a community or society that make it susceptible to a hazard, or the lack or unavailability of a resource or other aspects that make it susceptible to a specific hazard. So, an example of this would be, again, let's go back to Marinduque. You don't have a tertiary medical center capable of treating mercury poisoning. So they still have to go across the Bay of Tayabas to get treated in either Lucena, or have to go all the way back to Metro Manila. Okay? Or another example, in my municipality of deployment, there are many uh, men who live in the coastal areas who do compression diving. And one of the problems with compression diving is, if you don't know how to surface properly, you will develop decompression sickness, aka the bends. And a vulnerability is not having a hyperbaric oxygen chamber in the island of Marinduque. Again, because it's an island municipality, geographically disadvantaged at that, and there are no resources that could be that is considered worth having one of those facilities in the island. Capacity, on the other hand, is the strengths, attributes, and resources available to a community or society to manage and reduce disaster risks. Okay, so when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, one of the advantages of cities over um, rural areas is their capacity to have tertiary uh, facilities where you have ventilators, okay, where you have machines that could assist in managing the patients. Okay, so that is an example of capacity. Human resources for health um, a are also a form of capacity. So the disaster formula is risk equals hazard times vulnerability over capacity. So the hazard and the vulnerability increases risk, the capacity decreases risk, okay? Or mitigates risk. So for the World Health Organization, the core principles of health emergency disaster risk management is a risk-based approach. It is comprehensive. So there's prevention, preparedness, and they added a fifth to the disaster cycle, which is readiness. Okay, you can be prepared, but not necessarily ready. Response and recovery. Okay, it's an all hazards approach, inclusive, people and community centered. Okay, not property that is being protected. Okay, multi-sectoral, multidisciplinary collaboration. It is a whole of health and it is systems based. And it takes into account other ethical considerations, including gender, culture, and the marginalized. Okay. So components of health EDRM functions include policy, strategies, and legislation, planning and coordination, taking into account both human and financial resources, using information and technology and knowledge management, risk communications, health infrastructure and logistics being taken into account, health and other related services, empowering communities so that they are capable of managing disasters and emergencies themselves, and of course monitoring and evaluation. If you've worked long enough in the health sector, from a macroscopic view, monitoring and evaluation is one of the ways that you put the health sector or hold the health sector accountable for its programs. And the key takeaway for this is that the components are too big for any single person or sector to handle solely, nor claim any domain expertise. It should be participatory, multi-sectoral, and multidisciplinary. So a brief note about the relationship between the World Health Organization and its member states and the United Nations. The World Health Organization is a specialized agency of the United Nations governed by the World Health Assembly that meets annually. They set global health standards and policies that member states are encouraged, not necessarily required, to adopt. Okay? So the key components of disaster risk management for the health sector from the World Health Organization are governance, policy, planning, and coordination. For the DOH, the indicators of institutionalization of the disaster risk reduction and management for health is that a DRRMH plan is updated, approved, disseminated, and regularly tested. There is a functioning, organized, and trained health emergency response team. So during the lockdowns, you'll notice that they call them BERTs because at the level of the barangay, you already have a health emergency response team. So the Barangay Health Emergency Response Team. And you have available and accessible essential health commodities and an actual functioning operation center. So DRRMH planning is a participative process that studies hazards, risks, vulnerabilities, and capacities of a specific area or community. It is systemic, strategic, evidence-based, and consultative. It ensures that you have resilient health systems and institutions, and it involves contingency planning. So contingency planning is a process that analyzes specific potential events to a place or community that threatens the health of the population and what you can do as possible arrangements and workarounds as timely, effective, and appropriate responses. This is usually scenario based, okay? Meanwhile, a service or business continuity plan is a process that recognizes the hazards and the risks that an institution faces and methods to protect both personnel and the operational functions of the institution so that services or business are not interrupted. So consider the well the example I'm thinking about is the CrowdStrike outage. So there was an outage of internet services because of a buggy update to Microsoft. Okay, but think of another business continuity plan. Consider, for example, hospital services. Let's say somebody introduced ransomware into the uh, network of UERM, okay? So that you couldn't use electronic medical records. So what is your business continuity plan? You either shift to local computers, so no network, so you actually make files on your own, or you go analog, paper and pens, okay, to see and manage patients, okay, to document what is being done to a patient, okay. You identify the potential risks, how it affects the operations, implement safeguards and procedures to mitigate the risks, test and review these said procedures regularly. An evacuation plan, on the other hand, is when everything fails, how do you save your personnel as well as some key material resources, let's say your servers or your data from becoming casualties in a disaster. And then you need to have a communication plan. Again, because DRRMH is participatory, it involves systems and the community. One must be able to transmit information, including the available and unavailable resources, as well as assistance that is needed or that can be extended. So who is involved in the RRMH planning? It's your head of office, which is the health secretary if it's a DOH, or its regional director if it's in a region, a provincial health officer, a municipal health officer, a medical director for a hospital, the university president, or the dean of the College of Medicine, depending on which particular entity we are talking about. And then you have a disaster risk reduction and management health focal person, okay, so they are disaster chief, and various committee members, okay, including clusters that are specialists in medical, public health, water, sanitation or hygiene, and mental health and psychological support. So this is how to conduct DRRMH planning, including preparing the plan, data gathering and analysis, developing or updating the plan, integrate and translating the plan, so you practice, okay, when you integrate and translate it, and then you implement it during times of disaster, and then you monitor and evaluate, is the plan actually working? So preparing the plan is usually an impetus from the head of the institution, which convenes the DRRMH planning committee. Then you do your data gathering and analysis, okay? That includes risk, vulnerability, and capacity assessment, as well as situational analysis or SWOT analysis, which you will learn about in your third year in community medicine. And then you do your vulnerability assessment, capacity assessment, and then you develop or update the plan. And then you translate or integrate the plan into your own processes, okay? So if you are, for example, the ISO officer in your institution, you have to have these plans also documented and placed in your the folders of where you put such processes. And then you implement the plan and you do monitoring and evaluation. That is a regular activity that should be done at least every 3 years. Okay. So there are things to consider once this lecture is done. Disaster planning does not just have to be on an institutional level. It can be in social groups. It can be on an individual level. For your section, whenever I deliver this lecture, there is always a major flooding event happening so that classes are canceled and the Q&A session needs to be moved to the following session, okay? So for your section, you need to have your own DRRMH plan. You have to be able to check up on every member of your section, okay? To ensure that they are safe, especially during times of inclement weather, okay? And then planning is nothing without actual practice, so you need to exercise your DRRMH plan to test new strategies and activities. Like for example, one of your classmates lives in a boarding house in a flood-prone area and not in a high-rise condominium. Who does he or she turn to in case of such a scenario, okay, when there is flooding, okay? A proper disaster management in health is all-encompassing, but at the same time, it should be simple enough so that all stakeholders, so different levels of educational attainment, can easily understand and follow this. Okay. There are alternate frameworks for disaster management, and these are built on the idea that a lot of times the central or the hierarchical nature of governance tends to crystallize or solidify and tends to be too rigid, okay? Particularly when the disaster itself is all-encompassing, okay? So these frameworks include mutual aid disaster relief by forming mutual aid networks, your community pantries, of course. So these are just a few of the alternate frameworks. These are the sources I used for this lecture. It also includes the manual. So I will see you at the Q&A if in case you have questions. I will also have questions of my own.